We've all walked into a house and have seen the nightmare of someone else's paint, whether they didn't prep it right or they didn't do something right. So we're going to try to avoid all of that.
Cover your finished surfaces exceptionally well. Go overboard, because there's nothing worse than having a paint splatter or spill. That's first and foremost. Cover everything.
I've definitely done those projects with the budget paint, and the extra coats that you have to put on the wall means that you're paying probably the same amount as that medium to medium high grade paint, where you could have done 1 or 2 coats. The painting itself is the easy part. Hey everybody, welcome to the DIY Buddy Show. My name is Anson Young, and this is
Tyler Madden.
And today we're talking about paint, DIY paint, which is everybody's favorite subject. Everybody loves to paint, but we're going to help you get at least to a better spot with paint. I'm not a huge fan of painting. Tyler, you have some experience here.
Yeah, I've actually painted for probably collectively 6 years. I did commercial painting full-time in high school and in college. I don't love it, but I'm good at it. So first thing that we're going to talk about is a little bit of paint prep. The things to take care of before you get in there and just start slapping paint on the walls or the ceilings or whatever. Like I said, I've painted for a long time. I've spent very many hours, days, weeks of my life doing this. I know how to get the professional results from a paint job, and as a DIYer, you certainly want to take some of these into account rather than just assuming painting's not a hard job or there's no particular things to be aware of.
Yeah, we've all walked into a house and have seen the nightmare of someone else's paint, whether they didn't prep it right or they didn't do something right. So we're going to try to avoid all of that. So like when I'm starting off in a room like this, I just throw paint on the wall and I'm done, right?
That's it.
All right. And done.
That's it. No, a lot of the things that I think are very important to take care of prior to even getting to that point is you want to make sure anything that you don't want painted, obviously cover it more than you might expect you should. Like the floor, for instance. If a lot of you are not involved in a full renovation like this, where we did new drywall texture, we took all the baseboards off, we're doing all new, all of that, new flooring as well. So it's a little different scenario, but for many of you, you might be trying to just change the colors of existing walls and, ceilings, trim, doors, that sort of thing. Cover your finished surfaces exceptionally well. Go overboard, because there's nothing worse than having a paint splatter or spill in carpet or on something where it's just a nightmare to get off. So that's first and foremost. Cover everything, like a Dexter room.
Yeah. This kind of looks like a Dexter room, but it's, I mean, if you are in a project like this and you're just going to be replacing the floor, you don't need to go through those extra steps, and you're just going to be spraying basically on the floor for that line. But also, outlet covers is a big one. I've seen plenty of houses as an agent where they tried to paint around the outlet covers. That never works.
You're telling me you don't just paint over them?
Yeah, well, over them too. Man, just go like the switch and everything.
Yes, paint over every same color.
A little bit of time up front saves you so much headache at the end of it. So I find when I'm painting a room, which I dislike doing, it's 90% prep work, and then the painting itself is the easy part. And if you did all the prep right, then what you put in for the paint works so much better.
Yeah, the next thing is obviously making sure that your walls, if we're painting walls or drywall or plaster or what have you, is in good condition to get painted. I mean, you don't want to just assume that everything's good. Take out any nails that you've got in the walls, any old anchors if you're removing, stuff like that. I'm here looking at, a nail that's sticking through my ceiling up there that used to be like a plant hanger or something. But just making sure that you're very thorough and making certain you've prepped the walls as best as possible. But after all that's done, I think the most critical thing that I like to do is spend a lot of time, especially if your ceiling and your walls are a different color or your trim and your walls are a different color, spend the time to tape all of that. Make really nice crisp lines. We've all seen those projects where it's sexy as hell when you have a great transition from white ceilings to gray walls or color change, that sort of thing. But don't just tape it. Caulk over that tape line. So you add the tape nice and straight exactly where you want that color change, but then you add a bead of caulking. Just a siliconized acrylic caulking is what I use. You smooth that off and then you paint over that so that when you pull that tape, you're left with a chef's kiss of a straight line. And that's the most professional thing that I could say is very, very valuable.
I think that's pro level. And if you're not quite there yet, and if you just feel like the blue tape can get you, 90% of where you need to go, at least do that.
Yes.
If not, I haven't done the caulking method. Mm-hmm. I think that obviously the pros do it.
Yeah.
I'm not a pro. So. All right, real quick, let's talk about safety, because we would be remiss if you got some paint in your eyeballs, and we didn't talk about it. So safety goggles, you may not think that you need them, but once you're rolling and some paint goes whip, like right in your eye, you're gonna wish that you maybe had something on it,
or at least paint with your eyes closed. Like that's a nice alternative.
Also true. If you're spraying paint, you definitely want
to breathe as much of that in as possible, because those vapors, they really do wonders for your chest. We're probably going to cut that part out. If you are spraying, I definitely think it's very worthwhile getting a high quality respirator, not just a paper mask. At the very least, you've got to have that, but they have the full on respirators that go over. They've got the filters around your head, the whole 9 yards. You find out after the fact how much that stuff gets into your system.
So now you've prepped everything. Everything's good to go. And now you have to go out and buy paint and brushes and rollers and all those fun things.
Safety gear.
Yeah, safety gear. So I think that we need to talk next about paint materials and what to choose there. So let's start with probably paint, right?
Yeah.
Primer, paint, what are we doing?
Yeah, so like I said previously, if we've got a raw drywall product or a new texture, something like that is going to suck up a lot of material. I'm more fond of doing a dedicated coat of primer instead of an all-in-one paint and primer. I know that has gotten better over the years, but it's just stuck in my mind that you always want to do a nice heavy coat of primer on any drywall that hasn't had anything. That's going to give you a more even, consistent, and cohesive look.
But you were saying that you don't necessarily like the all-in-one, you would rather do the two-step process.
Correct.
When I'm dealing with, heavily smoke houses or water houses, we've used a lot of oil-based primers. If I'm doing a project like this, am I doing oil, regular primer? What are we doing?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be an oil-based for more run-of-the-mill things where you don't have heavy staining on the walls or the ceilings, or smoke residue is a big thing. That nicotine, we've all seen it in properties. If you're a seasoned investor, that sort of thing definitely needs a thick coat of an oil-based primer, because that's the best. It's going to give you the best results. It's the most hardcore version. But just like I said earlier, you could just go find a PVA-based primer it's just a latex primer that goes over any normal drywall. That's perfectly fine unless you've got, an odor or a stain that you're trying to conceal.
So we've done it the Tyler way. We've primed first, not a separate product, but we've primed first, and now we need to go buy paint. I think that a lot of people just go for budget paint or the lowest end at the hardware store, but there has to be, I've used the cheap stuff and it's never good.
I do think that there is a Goldilocks area where you're not getting the lowest quality paint, and I do still buy a reputable brand. Honestly, I don't know if we can talk about brands, but I'm a bigger fan of Sherwin-Williams paints.
Okay.
And then even within that brand, you can have a wide spectrum of here's their contractor grade entry level all the way up to here's the super Gucci expensive stuff. I don't choose either of those. Ordinarily, especially for my real estate investment properties. If you're DIYing and not doing, I also do luxury remodels. On those luxury remodels, we choose the Gucci stuff because ultimately it does have qualities that substantiate that price. But yeah, the entry level stuff, it's going to bite you in the butt later on down the road. It's not going to wear as well. It's not going to cover as well. You're probably going to have to do more coats of it. So yeah, somewhere in the middle is usually where I try to land in terms of quality.
I've definitely done those projects with the budget paint, and the extra coats that you have to put on the wall means that you're paying probably the same amount as that medium to medium high grade paint where you could have done 1 or 2 coats. We've literally put on 4 or 5 coats of the crap paint.
Yes.
And unfortunately, that's not where it's at. Don't do that.
All right, guys, now that we have everything prepped and ready, we have an idea of what kind of paint we're going to be using. We've identified whether we need to prime a hardcore layer of paint over some stains or odors, or if we could just go to town with an all-in-one sort of thing. But we're to the point where we're going to talk a little bit about means and methods on how to actually paint and some different methods that you can use.
Usually we've done rollers and then cut in with brushes, and that's worked for us. We don't DIY our investment projects, but if we're at home painting, that's usually what we do.
I think that's the path of least resistance for people that aren't doing this on a professional level. The other method would be spraying. That's something where I don't advise you do that if you're not going to do it regularly. If you're going to be doing this quite often, maybe go invest in a sprayer. You can even get the handheld sprayers that only hold, a quart or something. You're just going to refill that a lot, but it might get you through a pinch if this is, if you're going to do a whole house, it's gonna be a lot of refills. But there's a time and a place for spraying, especially if you want to do like just the doors in your house or just the baseboards. I think spraying, especially as it relates to trim, leaves a much better finish. There's no brush marks. There's no evidence that you painted. It just looks really crisp and really nice. I think brushing and rolling is the path of least resistance if you have limited skills. It's pretty forgiving.
Yeah, good enough for me.
Oh, that's right.
Any skills.
Yeah, and I think I will add, if you are going to brush in your rolling, like Anson said with the brush, you want to get into areas that the roller isn't going to go. I usually do that prior to rolling, so it's called a cut. So you cut in around the ceiling, you cut in your corners, you cut in at your doors where you get that nice detailed brush in those areas. And if you're using tape and caulking, you can actually overlap that so it doesn't have to be perfect.
Nice.
But yeah, any additional notes about methods that you think are pertinent or really important to think about as a DIYer?
Yeah, I think if you're kind of like prep, if you take your time with cutting and you really just take that time for the details and going slow, even though you want this to be over with as soon as possible, go slow, take your time, do a really good job on cutting, then the results will be that much better. And so not a lot of people like to do those little detail things, including myself. Yeah. But the time that you spend extra on prep and I think cutting and doing these small details make even the flatness of your walls, like the rest of it, just all come together and look really good.
When you're picking out these methods, if you're going to roll things, these rough walls are going to soak up more paint, and you're going to need a thicker roller, or a roller that's got a longer nap is what they call it. So making sure that you're tending to what type of wall you have, whether it's a super smooth level 4, level 5 finish, or if it's a knockdown texture, something like that. The longer the nap, the more paint it holds and the more paint it'll put on the wall. I think that's good to know as well. Instead of going and getting a foam roller, that's gonna be a pain in the ass.
Yeah, so you definitely have to, not all rollers are built the same, and so you're going to want to get the right roller for the job. And if you don't know, just ask the paint person at the paint desk, wherever you go, whether it's Sherwin-Williams or Lowe's. The person there knows, like, okay, is it texture like this? Then they'll be able to tell you exactly what to go buy to be able to paint that. So I know that when I'm painting, going in a, certain line, or I'm going in a certain way, I either know that I'm going to have to put in a second coat, but I'm tempted to go back and maybe retouch an area. And I know that drying is a big thing as well. So what do you have to say about that, professional?
Yeah, I think understanding that you need to be patient with things. I think paint always looks worst when it's wet. So if you're trying to evaluate whether or not you've done an adequate job on a painted wall or a surface, don't look at it while it's wet. Don't try and revisit it while it's wet, for sure. And especially, let's say you just got to the end of a wall that you started to paint and you want to look at the first part again, and you see an area that wants, you want to touch up, and it's been 20, 30 minutes since you were at that point. Don't visit that yet with another roll of, just say, hey, I'm gonna roll it on, because as that paint starts to adhere and dry, it's not fully cured yet. And if you hit it with more loose or more wet paint, it might pull some of it loose so that it's not actually adhered. And even if it dries there, that paint, that first layer of paint, if it's not adhered properly, I've seen this in multiple renovations where the paint just, it flakes off, or it's not bonded well. You really want to give it its time to cure and dry. So I oftentimes want to wait at least, 8-10 hours.
So that was all about painting. Hopefully you got some good DIY tips out of that. Again, my name is Anson Young. You can find me on Instagram at YoungAnson, or on YouTube. And how do we find you?
My name is Tyler Madden. Check me out on Instagram at Tyler Madden, or my business at Laurelless _. We show all the things that we do and some of the things that we don't love to do. But hopefully this was universally beneficial for you to understand paint a little better.